Okay, the meeting is now live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the May meeting of the Asheville Transit Committee. Today is May 18th, 2021, and we are meeting virtually today thanks to Amy Tessner and diligent work from the Asheville Transit Department at Asheville City and also the IT department. So we appreciate all you did to make this meeting happen today. The purpose of this committee is to serve as a conduit between all of the community stakeholders in Asheville about transit. So we are a group of primarily volunteers, and we appreciate I appreciate everyone's time and attention. I see we've got a lot of people popping on. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's call roll, and at that point, we'll determine at this point if we have a quorum. My name is Rochelle Sorensen Cox, and I am the chair of the Asheville Transit Committee. Brandon Oliver.
Here. Hello.
Welcome, Brandon. Kyle Sherrard.
Right here.
Thank you. Harvey Harold.
Here.
Hello, sir. Jeff Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Georgia Burtz. We're missing Georgia. Victoria Greaves. Michael Waddell. John Basone let me know that he is unable to attend today. And John Hahn, please. Okay, Kyle, do we have a quorum?
I don't think so. Let me just double count.
Thank you.
We do not.
Okay, so we will continue the meeting. We just will not be able to take any action or take any action. Okay, I would like to turn the time over now to city staff to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amy Tessner, and I am the administrative assistant for the transportation department.
Hello, my name is Eunice Lowley, and I am the transit planning manager.
I don't know if I should introduce myself. I'm Haley Burton. I'm the transit projects coordinator.
Hi, I am Barry Reiling, the general manager for our ATP Dev. Sorry, did I cut Jessica? You were still muted, so I didn't cut you off. Go for it.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Hi, this is Jessica Morris, City of Asheville Assistant Director of Transportation. Thanks.
Hi, LaShawn Abraham, Director of Operations, Asheville Transit.
Looks like we have Kim Roney, Councilwoman Kim Roney, joining us also. Thank you for being here, Kim. All right, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Or I guess I should have done that already. So welcome. Explanation of public comments. Amy, do you want to just discuss how public comments work, please?
Yes, so we received one public comment. If you would like to do an overview of that public comment at this time. And
I think that would be great.
Okay.
Yes, please. Oh, me do an overview. I do not have that public comment, do I?
You should have received an email, but I can go over that.
Thank you. Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
Hey, Amy, would you like for me to do that? I am fully aware of that public comment.
Yeah, definitely if you want to.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Barry.
Sure. We had an issue down at the transit center regarding the restroom doors that are covering the stalls. Those doors, when we rebuilt the transit center, don't have locks on them, so you can enter into the restroom, both the men's and the women's restrooms. And here, and I can't remember, it was probably mid-April, our staff, our cleaning staff down at the transit center had dealt with a couple of overdoses and just people who were camping out, living in the toilet space down there at the transit center. And quite honestly, they were in tears and having to deal with what they were seeing and happening in those restrooms down at the transit center. And one of our main cleaning lady down there, she came to me and said, "Can we just remove the doors? It's just a nightmare. People are going to die because they can't get to them quick enough." And our first knee reaction was remove the doors. Well, as probably okay for the men's restroom, not okay for the women's restroom. And someone filed the complaint that they really need to put the bathroom doors back on. Well, in researching it and trying to figure out the best way to deal with that situation, the doors were cut diagonally, top and bottom, both men's and women's restroom doors. Unfortunately, the women's restroom, the commode is sitting right behind that door. Over on the men's side, that commode is sitting out of view from anything, anywhere walking up to that doorway. And understandably, after looking at what was done, we cut both doors the identical, but the women's should have been done differently. It wasn't. So we went back, put the doors back on. We had cut them. The women's was leaving someone exposed in that restroom stall. So we went and got a piece of rubber and hung it across the bottom of that doorway. Immediately got a hold of the manufacturer of that door set and ordered a new door so we can put a new door in that women's restroom. And it went into production yesterday, and they said I should have it delivered the 21st, and then we'll go down and put it in and get it taken care of. So that's what the complaint was, is that was, that they had to deal with that. But in effect, it's a sidebar issue to what's going on down there at the transit center. There's some pretty ugly things happening down there. So no excuse for our failure to really take a look at what we knee-jerk reaction was, but we're taking care of it. We've got it closed off at this point, and we'll get a new door hung up as soon as it comes in. Like I said, supposed to have it by Friday, 19, 20, yeah. So I would hope by Monday evening, if we get it Friday, it'll be done. Won't take much to do.
Thank you, Barry. First, thanks for taking action. And the overwhelming stress of dealing with that situation at the transit center. I mean, that's it is overwhelming. There's no other way to say it. And frightening, and it has a lot of moving parts. I would really love to see at some point if maybe we could pull the Department of Health and Human Services in to just the conversation of how drug use and that affects transit in so many ways. And so I appreciate your action and advocacy, and look forward to that resolve. Jeff.
Yeah, I've read her complaint, her concern. And there's another piece of it, is that I don't think she was felt heard when she voiced her concern to transit staff. So I just offer that as well, just being sensitive to people's needs. And doesn't mean we have to agree with them all the time, but I think it's important that people feel heard. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff.
Any other comments about this public comment or issue? Jeff.
So I don't know if we'll get to this later in the meeting. So I'm just going to mention it here, and maybe it'll come up. But I'm still curious as to what gets entered into the complaint log. I've been following this complaint for a number of weeks, and so I was curious to look at the complaint log for the month of April that RATPDev puts out, and this complaint is not listed there. So when we get to the RATPDev report for April, I will want to continue the conversation about what gets entered into the complaint log and by who. I feel like we're missing some things, and so I'll just let you know that I'm going to want to have that conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. Communication is certainly the key to improving in any way. So no more public comments. We'll go ahead and move on to old business. Just an update on the Young's buses and Kyle, thank you.
Real quick, just as a matter of procedure, we need to review and approve the minutes from April on the agenda for today. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I guess we can't. Just ignore me. Never mind.
It's okay.
That's why we love Kyle. He's our detail guy. Yes. Good team. Thank you. I'm all over the place. Kyle keeps us in line. Appreciate that. Okay, so update on Young's buses, please. Contract and just what's happening there.
Are we going to approve?
And I think in this, we're just kind of looking for an end date. We sort of know.
Okay.
I don't know what we know. Oh, there you are.
Basically, this is going to end sooner than later. It's going to end on Wednesday, because the city, we are planning on going back to full capacity. And so we're planning to end Young's contract in terms of as we prepare to go back to full capacity. So we're in the process of notifying them to let them know that that's what is going to happen. Yes.
Jeff.
Eunice, you said Wednesday. Do you mean tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah, we've been having conversations with them over the last several weeks, month, in terms of what's going to happen. And what is really pushing us to do this is the recent executive order from the governor to go back to lifting all the social distance and everything else in place. So that's what we're planning on doing.
So does this mean we're going to full capacity tomorrow?
No, we're going to full capacity on Thursday, Eunice.
I'm sorry?
Eunice, we're going to full capacity on Thursday. Remember?
Yeah.
Right, but Young's is done tomorrow.
The Young's is tomorrow. That's what I said.
I get it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is, the last I heard is that date was in question in case the governor changed his mind, but sounds like we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
He originally, when we met with BBT and you, Jeff, on Friday that morning, it was still supposed to be June 1st that the restrictions would be lifted. And then later that same afternoon, the governor lifted all the restrictions. So we kind of scrambled a little bit to come up with our new date of going back to normal. And so we're going to do Thursday. But we should also say that fares won't go back into effect until June 1st. So there'll be a little bit of time to adjust back to paying fares.
Harvey.
Yes, even though we're going back to full capacity and we are still requiring everybody to wear a mask.
Yes, absolutely. So the governor's order, as well as the federal order, is that masks are still to be worn on public transit. And as of now, that is in effect through September 13th, I believe. of course, we will continue to monitor that. But for now, masks are still required on public transit and at the transit center and at bus stops.
Wait, can you clarify at bus stops?
Well, at all transit facilities, all public transit facilities, people should be wearing masks. Of course, if you're alone, then perhaps you don't, but that's the federal rule right now, is transit buses and facilities.
Good. That was my question. Mhm.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other questions? I personally am happy to have buses back at full capacity. And I also want to take this opportunity to express gratitude for being a writer and being able to depend on Asheville Transit during this gas situation. I didn't have any trouble getting where I needed to go, and that felt really good as a consumer and also as just a transit advocate. So thank you so much for that. Better Buses Together safety plan.
Hey, Michelle,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Jeff.
Brandon had a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brandon.
Oh, well, I'm trying to use these buttons appropriately. Okay, if we go back to full capacity, will we still need the use of all of the young routes, the follows?
No, Eunice just explained that that their contract is ending today. Tomorrow is their last day, and then starting Thursday, Asheville Transit will be running on their own. So with full capacity,
okay, awesome.
There's no longer a need. Are you good?
Eunice.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to last week. We had our guest Carmen Yubera from Just Economics, and she was speaking about the Better Buses plan to work together to just come up with a better safety plan, or an alternative. I don't mean better, no judgment here. Just an alternative plan for safety at transit, reimagining safety and including that. So I know we had some discussion about that last week when we had her available. You all should have received that in email form, and I just wonder if there's any, I open this up now to any discussion about that. Kind of ties into what we spoke about earlier with the drug use and the situation there. But anyway, if anyone has any, let's discuss that now. Please. Kyle.
I think it's a great idea to have some sort of person that is familiar or versed in social settings, social work, etc. I don't know that I necessarily think that it needs to be a replacement issue, as in a social worker will replace an existing employee or contractor, but I like the idea of maybe saying that whatever backup they're getting from security forces or APD or whatever could just, if it's there on the weekends, fine, but having somebody that's available to address actual individual and personal needs on the transit platform, I would totally get behind. I think that's wonderful, and I hope that multimodal and city council would too. So as a member of the transit committee, I would support it at a later time when we are able to vote on it.
Jeff.
Yeah, I spoke about this a couple of times last month, and certainly full steam ahead. I think this is the perfect plan for reimagining public safety in Asheville. It's a microcosm of exactly, in my mind, of exactly what we want. And we can do this in conjunction with security. I personally think it could replace security, but I just think I'm hoping that when we can vote as a committee, that we will endorse the plan, and how it's implemented, we'll let other people figure that out.
Thanks, Jeff. Are there any other comments about the safety plan or questions that we can send on to Carmen? Harvey, did you have?
No.
Okay. All right, well then let's keep moving. We'll move on to new business and have an update from city staff on the Talbert Land Grant and the Dogwood Health Trust. And for that, I think, Jessica, you're going to handle that. Thank you.
Sure. We have a presentation. Amy, if you're able to share that,
Okay.
that would be great. Thank you. So we just wanted to give you guys an update, and we were hoping to get a recommendation, but I think since there's not a quorum today, that's okay. We can just hear your feedback and see if we have a general consensus from those of you that are here today on this proposed purchase. But for those of you that don't know, the parking lot that's directly to the south of the transit center, we refer to it as the Talbert lot, only because that was the previous owner of the lot, Mr. Talbert and his family. It's at 50 Ashland Avenue, and the city is currently in the process of purchasing that parking area. Next slide, please. So this presentation is going to give you some background on the location, what's around it, background in terms of the history, and we'll talk a little bit about opportunities that we see for the property, which of course we see as a key property for transit. I'll go over briefly some of the due diligence work that the city has done as we've been looking to acquire this property. I'll talk a little bit about the proposed funding that we are looking to use to purchase the property and what the next steps are. Next slide. So this is an aerial view of the property area. If you can see at the top edge of the red boundary, that is our current transit station. You can kind of see the greenish roof under there. The parking lot, the 50 Ashland Avenue parking lot, is directly to the south of that. And then that little driveway that accesses the parking lot to the south of the transit center, that little piece of property is actually already owned by the city. So right now the city owns the transit station parcel and that little driveway right there. So if we were to purchase the Talbert lot, we would end up having about 1.48 acres of land to do something with. The zoning is Central Business District, which basically means that we have a lot of opportunity for really to build any kind of building, if you will. We don't have a height restriction per se, and we can have all kinds of different uses under CBD zoning if we want to. As far as constraints on the site, there's really not a whole lot of constraints. It's pretty much a blank slate, which is really great, I think, because it gives us a lot of leeway as to what we might end up having someday. One constraint is that, you know, in a perfect world, the Bella's fine jewelry site, we would maybe also have that as well, just to have really great access to both Cox Avenue and Ashland Avenue. But at this time, we're not looking to purchase that. It's not for sale either, I should say. Next slide, please. So whenever the city talks about purchasing any kind of property, it's really important for us to look back at the history. Since there's been a lot of focus, as there should be, on the history of property ownership and the impacts of urban renewal, as well as redlining, we want to just make sure that we talk about those things as they relate to any kind of purchase we talk about. So the yellow area on the map shows an area that was previously an area of urban renewal. The red area is area of redlining. And so those two things obviously had a huge impact on the properties within them and the ownership, and essentially, you know, the taking of those ownership rights from historically African American communities. And so it's a little hard to see in this view, but at the very top of the red area towards the left, you can see the roof of the transit center. So the transit center itself was technically not a part of a redlining district or an urban renewal area, but you can see that the Talbert lot that we're talking about at 50 Ashland Avenue was part of a redlining district. So there's definitely a history that we need to consider with that, and just make sure that everyone is aware of it. Next slide.
I have a question. Should I wait till the end, but it's specifically for that slide?
No, go ahead.
If we could go back to that slide. So this was an area, this particular piece of property was redlined, is what
Correct.
when I look at this. So what that says to me is that there, and I only have to conjecture because I haven't heard the history of that property, is that it's possible, maybe even likely, that the value of that property was significantly diminished because it was redlined. And it could then be the history of that property that someone purchased it, perhaps from an African-American family or business, and maybe demolished the business that was there, paved it over, made it into a parking lot, has been making money on it, and is now selling it for $2.5 million. And so this causes me great concern, and I haven't heard where we have actually done the due diligence regarding where this fits in the scheme of, I mean, this may be a piece of property that this paying $2.5 million for the Talbert family, this may be money that is owed to the African-American community. So I'll stop there and raise a significant concern that I haven't heard addressed yet.
Right. And I unfortunately can't directly address that, but you're not wrong. And that's a concern that's been brought up by the Housing and Community Development Committee, which is the committee of council members. They actually met this morning and had a very similar conversation this morning about that exact thing. And it's part of a larger conversation that the city's having about, other properties as well. So as far as the ownership history, I don't know that we have the best records of that, perhaps going back as long as we would like. When I look at some aerial information and some property ownership information, it seems as though it's changed hands a couple of times, maybe in the last 100 years, but that doesn't mean that what you're saying is incorrect. It's very possible that this piece of property could have been owned and therefore the value depressed because it was in a redlining district. So I definitely want to validate what you're saying. And I'm hoping that we can get some additional information about the very specifics of this property. The Housing and Community Development Committee that met this morning, they did not take action in terms of making a recommendation for purchase because they wanted to get some additional information about the property with regard to your exact question. So it is a big consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So just in terms of the city's kind of looking at this piece of property, the background is that in 2009, the city did a downtown master plan, and this property, as well as many others, were identified as possible redevelopment / enhancement opportunities, mostly because it's a parking lot, a surface parking lot. So it's a pretty, low use in terms of its property value and what could be put in that parcel it's not being fully utilized by any means. More recently, in 2018, the city entered into a lease with the Talbert family to to lease the property, which we have been doing since 2018, and we've been then re-renting or releasing the parking spaces in that lot, although we don't have a whole lot of folks that are currently leasing those parking spaces. And at that same time, we started to talk with the Talbert family about the possibility of the city ultimately purchasing the property so that we could acquire it for future transit center expansion. So even more recently, in 2020, the Talbert Family Trust, they decided that they would agree to sell the property to the city for $2.5 million. And this was based on fair market appraisals that were done by both their side and the city side. And once we went under contract with them. We've been under contract with them for probably maybe eight months, maybe a little bit more, while we did some due diligence on the property. And we also started a conversation with the Dogwood Health Trust about our hopes that they would be interested in partnering with us to purchase the property and ultimately develop it in a way that would definitely include affordable housing, as well as, of course, being a transit center. At the primary use would be a transit center, but we wanted to be able to include transit, affordable housing as well. Can you hold on one moment? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
While there is a break, I'm wondering, since there is one more person on the call since we began, is it possible that we now are at a quorum?
Are there any members of the Transit Committee on the phone right now that were not present at the roll call?
It was a shot.
I'm so sorry. The trials and errors of working at home. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. So we are at the due diligence phase of this, and so we have completed some initial investigations of the site, and I'll talk a little bit more about what due diligence we've done on the next slide, I believe. Oh, not quite the next slide. So the concept here, of course, is a transit-oriented development project. So the primary goal here is to enlarge our transit center because, let's face it, it's very constrained. There's no room for growth. Literally, we can't build up, we can't build out, and it's, I would say, very insufficient for our current level of use. And as we continue to expand our transit system, we all know that site is just going to get even more and more constrained. So we have talked with the Dogwood Health Trust, and they are very interested in this project. They have offered to purchase, go in on the purchase price with the city and essentially fund half of the purchase price, which is very generous. Their primary concern is, well, I shouldn't speak for them, but I know that one of their primary concerns is affordable housing. But of course, they recognize the benefit and the linkage between affordable housing and transportation. And having those two things in one place is a huge benefit to folks in terms of how they can lower their overall household costs. So we feel that this property purchase and this ultimate project hits two strategic goals: affordable housing and transportation accessibility, and of course, a connected and engaged community. Next slide, please. So these are just pictures of other people's, other places, transit centers that are more than just a transit center. So they include things like, of course, affordable housing. They could include some retail spaces or like small restaurant spaces. They could include community rooms, city services, or, bill paying. There's all kinds of things that we could have as part of an ultimate project. So it's, like I said, it's kind of a blank slate, which is a really good thing, because we can work with the community to identify exactly what this could be. Next slide, please. I think the next slide is just a couple more pictures. Yes, okay, so next slide, please. So the due diligence work that we've done so far, and this is while we've been under contract for the property, we wanted to, of course, make sure that there were no existing environmental conditions. And we also wanted to do some geotechnical investigation, which basically means that we were doing some soil testing to see if the soils were in good enough condition to support a building, like literally support a structure. And so we contracted with some folks to do some investigations of the site. And we found that in terms of environmental conditions, there really wasn't anything, which is great. It's pretty much been a parking lot for a very long time. And so we didn't find any, pollutants or anything like that. So for the geotechnical investigation, that was a little bit more complicated. We did a bunch of drillings or borings into different parts of the site. And what we found is not uncommon to this very specific part of downtown, but we found that there was a significant amount of what they call fill dirt, which is basically just kind of loose soil that was brought in, but never really compacted, and isn't like a consistent type of soil across the site. And the only bad part about that is that it means that we have to do some what they call soil conditioning to make the soil better so that it could support a structure. And depending on how big the structure is, depends on how much soil conditioning you have to do. And so there's an added cost to that when we ultimately go to construction. But in the grand scheme of things, what we were told was that the most amount of money that it would cost in addition to what we would build would be about $500,000. It sounds like a lot, but given what would ultimately be, I'm guessing let's just say $50 million building that goes there, it's not a huge additional expense, and it's pretty common for this area of town. And so anybody who owned it or built something there, anything bigger than a one-story building would have to go through this soil conditioning expense. We also have started conversations with the Federal Transit Administration, because we would expect to apply for FTA grants to help us ultimately with the cost of a project. And so even though we're not using any federal transit grant funds for this purchase of the property, the FTA considers it to be part of an overall project, and therefore they want to be involved from the beginning. So we've been having conversations with them. They have already determined that whatever we build isn't going to be an environmental impact on the site or the surrounding area. And so they have approved what they call a categorical exclusion for NEPA, which, like I said, is basically saying this project is in an urban area. It's, no matter how big or small this project is, it's not going to have an impact on any environmental resources. So that's a really great thing to have in our pocket already. But of course, there's a lot more that we would do going forward with FTA, including we need to do a historic resources analysis, which is more about like historic buildings that might be in the near vicinity and if there'd be any impact on those. And so it's a pretty straightforward process to go through to do this historic resources analysis, and it looks at all the properties around it, and anything over 50 years old could be considered historic. And so we just have to have someone who's qualified go and look at all of the buildings around the site and let us know if the future project might have any impact on those. Next slide, please. Okay, so money-wise, $2.5 million is the agreed upon purchase price, and Dogwood Health Trust has agreed to provide half of that, so $1.25 million. We've spent about $75,000 on the due diligence, so that's the environmental and the geotech investigations that we completed. And so the remaining expense, which is $1.325 million, is being proposed to come from the sale of city property that was recently completed at 172 and 174 South Charlotte Street. And I will say that this was also a conversation that the Housing and Community Development Committee was discussing this morning, because 172 and 174 South Charlotte Street were also partially in a urban renewal area. And so that's another piece of this conversation that's very important to be aware of, is that historical context as it relates to redlining and urban renewal. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next steps are, and this may change because of these conversations that are ongoing with the Housing and Community Development Department, but as of now, we have scheduled to go to council on the 25th, which is next week, to talk about the purchase, and which requires accepting Dogwood Health Trust funding and budgeting that into the purchase, as well as allocating funding from the city's general fund to complete the purchase. And if that goes forward as scheduled, then we would close on the property at the end of June. And then after that, there's the timeline isn't clear, to be honest. We don't have a plan in hand. All I can tell you is that we would continue to rent out the parking spaces as we do now. And then we would start to figure out a way to come up with a community engagement process that would help us figure out what we want to do with the property. What would we want to see as part of a new transit center? And then funding for all of this, of course, is up in the air. I think it's just another reason to continue the conversation about transit funding in general, including, a quarter-cent sales tax for transit and other partnerships that we might be able to secure, because we have facility needs that are currently unfunded. And it's unfortunate that we don't have access to funds to pay for this piece of property, just out of transit funding. We kind of have to scrounge funding together from different places because we don't have a dedicated transit fund. And so I'm hoping that is something that we can work on together in the future. that's kind of a separate topic, but it's related because it's important, because we can't get better facilities and a better system without additional funding, right? So that's all I've got. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. I will admit that I'm not the most well-versed on the issues that Jeff was bringing up, but I'd be happy to, try to get additional information. I will tell you that the Housing and Community Development Committee, so they didn't vote on it this morning because they had these concerns. And so they talked about scheduling a special meeting next Tuesday. So it would be before the council meeting to talk about it again. So I would encourage you guys to look for that meeting. I think, let me look and see what time it is. But I think that, there's a lot going on here, right? We don't want to forget about the history of the property, but I feel like we also have to think about the need for our transit system, and they're separate things. But I don't really see how we can move forward with our transit master plan and continue to expand our transit routes and serve our riders better if we don't have a better transit center. And I don't see where else we could do another transit center downtown. So it's a tough conversation to have. And I encourage you guys to be part of that. I'm happy to answer any questions. And in the meantime, I'll look up when that meeting is.
Jeff.
Yeah, this is kind of a tangential question. I was down at the transit center today, and there were 4 large white buses, the sizes of an art bus. And that got me very curious. And it's not really related to your presentation, except that it was on this piece of property, which apparently we're renting, or transit is renting. So what's up?
Those are buses that we are getting rid of for Henderson County. So they're old buses that I guess the city helped them procure many, many years ago that are at the end of their useful life. And so we're helping them to surplus them. And that was the only place we could find to park them.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation, Jessica. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yeah, Jessica, thank you so much. It'll be interesting and exciting to see how this all plays out. And then you'll let us know, or someone can let us know when that Tuesday meeting is, so that we could.
It's going to be at 2:00 on Tuesday, the 25th. And that will be a virtual meeting. I don't know how they're going to deal with any public comment. So we can make sure to forward that information to you guys as soon as we get it.
Thank you. And will you just remind me again the name of that committee or group? Thank you.
Sure. So it's the Housing and Community Development Committee, and it's one of the committees of council. So it's comprised of 3 council members. So there's maybe 5 or 6 different council committees that each have 3 of the 7 council members on it. And so this one is chaired by Councilwoman Turner, and the other 2 members are Councilwoman Mosley and Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you. Sure. Jeff, did you have another question? I thought I saw your hand. Okay. So next we have a new transit committee application. Eunice, you want to talk about that a little bit, please? And this is for Jean Bedore.
Yes. I believe this is somebody who may have applied in the past, probably sometime last year. Jeff and I were talking about that before the meeting began. And so she may have put in her application again in terms of becoming part of the transit committee. She was invited to participate in today's meeting, and I don't think no, she did not.
She did not get invited, or she did?
She did. She was invited, yeah, but we don't see her participating in today's meeting. So what we can do is review the application, discuss it, or wait till she attends the next meeting and see what we can do, because it'll be great to listen to her in terms of her interest and why she wants to become part of TC Transit Committee, even though that information is listed on the application.
Kyle.
Since there's only 5 of us, I would just suggest we tack it on to next month's meeting and review it then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're going to hear from Ms. Haley about status update on bus stop improvement project. We are happy to have you with us, Haley. Thank you so much. Haley Burton.
Yeah, thank you. I took last time we met was my second day of work, so I'm glad to have some bearings now and come back with a quick presentation. And this will be just a quick overview. We want to bring back to the conversation this bus stop improvement project. So today I'll just give a basic overview kind of as a refresher with the intent that we continue this conversation in future meetings. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So in 2020, the city of Asheville applied for and received a $1 million grant from the Federal Transit Administration for bus stop improvements. And those improvements can look like things you'd expect: shelters, seating, lighting, signage, ADA pads, maps, trash cans, those types of improvements. And they can be made over the next 2 to 3 years. Next slide, please. So we have, based on some criteria of looking at ridership data or the number of routes served at certain bus stops, equity considerations, and just like general need, we have a current list of 98 different bus stops that will see improvements over the next 2 to 3 years. And the list is here, but there's 45 stops that are expected to receive bus shelters and or seating, as well as trash cans. 71 bus stops will have improved lighting, and 35 new ADA pads will be put in, which improves accessibility at the stop. 34 bus shelters are going to receive map holders, which just allow for passengers to kind of check for route information while they're at the stop. And there will be digital signage installed at the UNC Asheville and the Asheville Housing Authority properties. So that is kind of where we're currently at. And for our next steps, we've been awarded these funds by the FTA, but to be able to kind of get that money in the pocket, we need to kind of document the exact plan for how we're going to spend these funds, so that we can receive those, as well as we'll need to coordinate the 10 to 20% local match of these grant funds from the city per the requirements. And then while we're coordinating with FTA, the major thing that we're working on right now is just planning out the phasing of these improvements. And so we expect that will be likely 3 major phases, kind of considering cost effectiveness, timing of removal of old shelters or benches that may not be up to standard, and just general need. And then, of course, yes, moving forward, we want to continue these conversations and involve you in the process as we're scheduling and also implementing these, which we're very excited for, and I'm sure you all are as well. So that's really it. That's a quick update, but would love to take any comments or questions. And as far as comments, especially if you have any suggestions for consideration of this phasing schedule that you would want us to keep in mind, I think that would be a good way to direct the conversation as well.
Thanks, Haley. This is very exciting. Jeff.
Yeah, this is really great news, and appreciate it. Appreciate your presentation, Haley. You may not know the answer to this question, but it's been a concern of mine for quite some time. When I look at the shelters around the city, the plexiglass begins to dull, and so it seems to me, I don't know what the right word here. A maintenance person could talk about there, could say this more clearly than I could, but they don't wear well, and because they get cloudy, and I'm wondering if that can be part of the equation in terms of getting new shelters, is to make sure that they are low maintenance and don't have these this cloudiness issue, or maybe they just need to be cleaned. I've never been clear how the shelters are cleaned. I know they empty the trash cans at the shelters, but I'm really not sure what else might be done. I don't know if it just needs a wash, but I have a feeling it's something more difficult than that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So that clear shelter that you're speaking of is like the city standard shelter, and there's pros and cons. The pro of it being clear is that it has the potential for high visibility, but we have heard that that's a concern of them getting dirty quickly. I know that there have been discussions before I joined the city of changing the city standard, and I believe we've gotten some different quotes of different shelters. I do not know where exactly that conversation has landed, but I think it's something we can consider moving forward. And I believe looking at a standard also for benches is something that we're going to consider as part of this process as well.
Are there any other questions for Haley? Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're going to move on to the cost of proposed service improvements and the expansion, and that'll be city staff.
Hi. So basically, this is intended to be a quick overview as that process continues, and my intent is to provide a presentation at the next month meeting. We have been talking to RATP dev staff to provide us with cost estimate for the proposed service improvement later this year. And that entails looking at extended hours as part of the recommendation that we've discussed with Transit Committee previously. We're also looking at frequency improvements to the S3 as well as the S6. And when we take a look at the estimated cost, it is about 1.8 if those services are provided or implemented, proposed services are implemented separately. However, we're also looking at implementation date of October later this year. And since it is estimated to be implemented over a 9-month period, we're looking at $1.25 million. And that's the money that's the estimate that have been provided to City Council. And I believe it's part of the ongoing budget discussion to be presented on the May 25th council meeting. And so based on all the discussion, my goal is to bring back a presentation to the Transit Committee and lay out all the different aspects of the service improvements to be made.
Thank you, Eunice, for keeping us on top of that. Let's see, next we're going to talk about the Transit Committee becoming a commission. This is very exciting. Let's talk about this possibility.
I'm not sure when this is going to go to the board and commissions committee. I took a look at the meeting calendar, and it seems like they met May 11th last week, and there's a meeting coming on in June, on the 11th of June. And these are efforts being led by Councilwoman Kim Rooney. So I see her here, and hopefully she can provide additional input into that effort.
Thank you, Eunice. So what I can say is that I have requested this to be part of the Boards and Commissions Committee future agenda. We do have an outstanding recommendation from the Transit Committee from, I guess it's now been almost 2 years ago, to move to the Transit Committee be a commission that reports directly to Council. There have been ongoing conversations at the Multimodal Transportation Commission, and I can let the chair know to share information when it will be part of the Boards and Commissions Subcommittee of Council agenda in the future.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate your leadership and your just diligence on this. I know you've been working behind the scenes for a very, very long time on this issue, and I am so grateful for all you do.
And thank you all for your service.
Okay, update on, well, I think this kind of fixed itself. The update on the city's plan if there was a gas shortage.
Yeah, this was at the height of what was happening last week, and you wanted us to provide input as to what's happening and if and whether the city has a plan. Yes, we do have a plan in place should anything like this happen. And we have been getting information from fleet services in terms of inventory update of diesel as well as unleaded gas we have. So quickly, just wanted to provide a quick update in terms of what we have. On the 13th of this month, we received information, and as of last week, we have 22,000 gallons of diesel fuel in place. We also have 15,635 gallons of unleaded gas. Average usage is about 1,000 or more gallons per city vehicles that are being fueled to use either diesel or unleaded gas. And based on the supply we have about the fuel for diesel is available for, or is supplied for 21 days. And for leaded gas, that's about, give and take, about 15 days. So the supply we have, should there be a situation like this before, we do have a supply in place to fuel all the city vehicles. And we also have an additional fuel pump to be able to fuel transit buses as well. So just wanted to give a quick update as to what's happening on that.
Jeff.
Yes, Eunice, do you know if transit has any kind of priority in terms of getting refueled before other, I'll say maybe private businesses? Does that exist? Is that possible?
Honestly, I'm not sure, other than what we have in place to fuel transit buses, as well as the city supply. And I can basically see, Barry, do we have anything like that other than the supplies that we have to fuel transit buses?
No, I'm not aware of any priority for transit. It's usually the agency, and it looks to me like Buncombe, or right here in Asheville, the availability of the fuel resource is looked at closely and monitored, and they were all over it. And But as far as a priority to get fuel, I don't think that happens.
I would think that would be something that would be meaningful for a city. And what I'll add to that is I think there's a PR opportunity here. You know, while the rest of Asheville was having a gas shortage, your transit was running.
Yeah.
Well, and they did that, and they took care of public works vehicles as well.
Yeah.
So they were prepared for the city itself. Their plan is a pretty good plan from what I've seen around.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good work. Again, I certainly appreciate that I was able to get to work and didn't have to worry about gas.
Of course, our employees had to worry about trying to get here. You know, that's the other part of it. And we had a few, I mean, heck, if we could get a 5-gallon filled and we could help out, we were doing that. So that's what you have to do. So if we had to, we'd go get them, you know, do what we can to make it work. So.
Okay, so we've kind of already addressed these next two things, the change back the capacity, going back to regular, and also restoring fares on transit. But Barry, do you want to touch on those two things just again real quickly?
We're going to start up full service, full load service starting Thursday. Young's will stop running Wednesday evening, and then and they're aware of that. And of course, we're going over some pointers with our operators tomorrow, some information. We've hired 15 new operators since first of last year. So it wouldn't hurt to refresh and get their minds wrapped around full load, board at the front, all those kind of things. That's a completely different ballgame starting Thursday. And then we're planning on doing full fares starting June 1 is what the plan is. And as Jessica alluded to, this since Friday is when the governor changed the mandate and basically opened everything up. So it allowed us to go back to full ridership, and you didn't have to keep the 6-foot distancing. But as she said, and this is the one that will be a pain for the operators, is that customers do have to wear their mask, and that's a transit CDC mandate until September. My guess is that will probably change sooner, and we'll just have to play that out and see. But in the meantime, we're required to ask for people to wear masks, make them wear masks. It's a requirement. They have to wear masks, and we can ask them to get off if they don't, which that's just part of what we're doing. I hope that helps. Jeff.
Yeah, Barry, will you be loading from the back or from the front up until June 1st?
Front. We start loading in the front come Thursday.
Okay, even though it's fare free?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, because the volume when we step up on volume, you really do want to go back to the norm, come in the front, go back out the back. We will still allow people to go out the front, but it's just the smooth operation. We'll have that in place before June. It's going to be a couple of days of tweaking, but we'll get it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Harvey.
What about your older passengers? You talk about loading from the front to the back.
Yes. We're not picking you up anymore, Harvey.
I figured you'd kick me to the curb.
Yeah, well, we're just going back to normal. I mean, if you have a wheelchair, if we need to go through the front, I mean, that's where we're going to kneel the bus. So the idea is everybody come in the front. And then if you have trouble going out that back door, and you need the bus kneeled for you to get off the bus, you just need a little patience, let them come in, get around you, and then move on through the front door. And we'll work with that like we always have. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, you were talking about loading from the front to the back, but the younger folks, they usually like to go to the back anyway. But
yeah, but we're going to only open the front door to board.
Right.
You know, so that's the idea, is come through the front door, because in 2 weeks you're going to be paying a fare or swiping a card. So,
Okie dokie.
okay.
All righty then.
Thank you, Barry. So next up is department updates from city staff in the monthly transit memo.
Do you want me to go through that? Or
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Or do you need the whole thing, or just, I mean, if there's any questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are any questions specific to any of the areas highlighted.
Jeff?
Yeah, Eunice, I saw the update on the Biltmore Avenue, McDowell Street corridor study. And I also know that there's been a Tunnel Road corridor study. I didn't see that mentioned. But I would be curious to know where we are in this process. I mean, I attended the Tunnel Road corridor study, and it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. But I also know that Tunnel Road corridor study is like years away. So what I didn't get a sense from is where we are on the Biltmore Avenue, McDowell Street corridor study.
On the Tunnel project, I may have to get additional information and share with the group in terms of what's happening. But for the corridor study, I know that it's been completed. And at the last meeting, they provided a recommendation in terms of how to move forward with the project. In terms of all the recommendations, for instance, intersection improvements, bike and ped improvement, as well as opportunity to enhance transit service operated within that corridor. So I haven't heard anything other than the recommendations that was shared with us during the last meeting. And I could provide additional information if it become available.
Well, that suggests to me that it's actually quite a ways away, because the recommendations that I heard for Tunnel Road were rather significant. I mean, it has businesses closing entrances and extra roads being built that parallel Tunnel Road, or small little. That probably answers my question. They're at the recommendation stage, but it's still a long ways away.
I can jump in and give some more information. So the city's been working with the MPO on two corridor studies. That's the Tunnel Road and Hendersonville Road corridor studies. And then the city on its own has been doing the corridor study for Biltmore and McDowell. All three have been more or less kind of moving at the same pace, give or take. And all three of those studies are being drafted. So I think what you probably were presented was initial recommendations to get feedback. But the draft reports are being put together right now, and all three of those are going to be presented to the Multimodal Transportation Commission at their June 23rd meeting. And then after that, they would move forward to council for recommended for approval. And really, a corridor study is like the first step of a planning process. So everything that's recommended in there, some things might be short-term improvements, but a lot of them, especially like you were saying, Jeff, with the Tunnel Road, those are major recommendations for major changes to those corridors, which would take a lot of time and a lot of money. But it's intended to lay the groundwork for future changes, right? So it's an important first step in the planning process, and the council will take a look at those. And we're still trying to figure out if these studies would be adopted as like an amendment to our comprehensive plan, or if they're just standalone transportation studies. That's still kind of in discussions. We're not quite sure if that's the right avenue for them, but either way, they'll be adopted hopefully by the council and be that groundwork for future improvements for all of these corridors.
Okay, any other questions on that? Moving on to operations updates from ART staff, please.
Were there any questions about the attachments? Jeff, I know you had a question with the complaint log.
Yeah, I have two questions here. First of all, I want to ask about complaint number 140. There was a fairly heated exchange between a rider and a driver. And essentially what the complaint log did is it gave the passenger's side of the story, and it gave the driver's side, which was a Young's driver. And it may be moot now since Young is going away. I didn't see resolution, and it made me wonder, do we have recordings to verify, because the stories were quite different as I read them. Is there any resolution there, or is it just we just got to chalk that up to these two people were at loggerheads?
We don't have the recordings for Young's buses.
Okay. That's what I suspected.
Yeah, that statement came from the operator
Yeah.
from Young's.
Okay. The other question I have has to do again about the complaint log. So we talked about this last month, and I learned something new, I think. So I'm coming back for some clarification. I was noticing that most of the items in the complaint log were entered by Amy Tesner, and I understand that she does that, I think, on behalf of ART or the city. But first of all, start at the very beginning. What are the sources of complaints? Because one of the things I think I learned last month is that the complaints that come in on the telephone line at the Art Center may not be recorded in the complaint log. So I'm not sure what the source of complaints are, and I would like some further update on whether or not they're all being entered into the log.
Yeah, we get complaints coming in from the telephone, passenger recorded on paper
report.
There is an email either sent to myself or the city.
Yeah.
A lot of times the complaints were took care of before anything, so they were not gathered onto the complaint log. But since our meeting last month, we have been entering all of those complaints in.
Okay, because this month's complaint log looked very similar to last, just in terms of the number of complaints. But I just wanted to verify that any complaint that comes in on the phone line is being entered into the log. Any paper report complaint is being entered into the log, and any email communication. Because again, the complaint that we've already talked about did not show up in the log. So
right. Okay. So yes, once I get those complaints, I'll put them in. But this complaint that you're mentioning with the transit stall bathrooms, we did not receive that complaint until May 3rd. She did list some April dates in there, but we were not aware of anything until May 3rd. So
I understand. Okay.
So that will be on this May's complaint.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you, LaShawn.
You're welcome.
I can ask another question.
Please.
Sure. Go ahead.
I heard that, Harvey.
Did you?
I did.
Let me push my.
Okay, so ridership reports. Are we all good on operation updates from ART? Any other questions? Moving on to other business. There isn't any. So rider experience. I believe we've already touched on. Well, actually, no. Rider experience. Transit committee has any noteworthy experiences? I certainly do. Again, I've already mentioned I appreciate that I was able to get where I needed to during the gas shortage, and just really appreciate the plan that was put in place and executed so swimmingly. So thank you so much. We've already also talked about, Barry, thank you so much for the update on the women's restroom door at the art station. So I feel like we've touched on everything unless anyone has anything else to add. Any other things to discuss? Well, thank you so much, Kyle, timekeeper. How's this for keeping on time?
Well, I think it's only by virtue of we can't vote. So
Exactly. Well, I appreciate everyone's, attention to this and time and the conversations, both in person and otherwise that have happened since the last meeting. Appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for being here. And I guess if there's nothing else, just a reminder that the next Transit Committee meeting will be June 15th, following the same digital format. Hopefully we'll have a quorum and we'll be able to actually do some business. But I do think some good things happened today, and I appreciate everyone's time. Councilwoman Roney, thank you again for all your leadership, and the team at Asheville City as well. And of course, Asheville Redefines Transit. So thanks everyone. And with that, we'll adjourn. Have a great evening. Thanks.